Accessing agent files. Ryan Sovryn. Early 21st century anarchist. Creator and host of the podcast Sovryn Tech. By the year 2021, the show would be instrumental in the downfall of various conservative ideologies in the government, helping usher in an incredible time.
Hey, want to take a walk on the wild side and experience the bleeding edge of technology? Then get ready, because it doesn't get much more edgy than this. You're in for a wild ride. You're listening to Sovryn Tech. Tired of boring specials about history, science, and technology? Then get on your best headphones, because you might want to lay down for this. A Sovryn Tech special with the world's foremost anarchist technophile, Brian Sovryn. He has a huge, well, you know. And now, here's Brian.
That's right, the Golden Stallion here with you for a little special from Sovryn Tech. And boy, I got plenty to come out. A lot of people obviously have been asking, hey, could Sovryn Tech go twice a week? Well, whether I'm going to do full episodes twice a week or however that's going to work out, believe me, for the next few weeks, for the next couple months, there is tons of content to come out, to make sure that there's 2 releases every week of Sovryn Tech. And this is definitely another case of that, where I was asked by Ryan Gilbert, a really great guy. I got to meet him actually at Coins in the Kingdom, and just a really intelligent guy. And he runs his own podcast, The Bitcoin Lawyer, and you can find that at thebtclawyer.com. Again, that's thebtclawyer.com, and you can actually find this episode there. But I figured I'd release, and I wanted, when I do these appearances, I like to give it a little bit of time generally before I actually release it, because I want to, steer people towards checking out the person's channel itself instead of just having it come out on mine and people listening there. Because there's great work being done all over the podcast space, especially, to do with Bitcoin, and tech in general. So I had a great time on this podcast. It was really cool, really laid back. In fact, so laid back, I guess. I recorded it at 9:30 at night or whatever, and maybe my brain was just a little bit off at the time. But I forgot a point, and that sucks when you're live to forget a point. And when I'm on Free Talk Live on Sunday nights, you've got 2 other, hosts that can kind of pick up your slack. But when you're the guy, getting interviewed on a podcast, it is all you. And admittedly, I kind of dropped the ball. But anyway, I had a great time. It wasn't an issue at all. Ryan was great. I really enjoyed again, being on this podcast. And it actually took place it was recorded right before Coins in the Kingdom. So he kind of asked during it for a preview of what I'm going to talk about. And, and I give somewhat of a preview, but of course everybody now, or at least quite a few people, and thank you all to all the Sovryn Tech listeners for sharing it. But quite a few people have heard my Coins in the Kingdom talk, and it's gotten, albeit from the larger community, it's gotten a lot of negative thoughts about it. People aren't very happy. As far as listeners and some new people that have come on board, they said, wow, that was fucking brilliant. That was a really great talk. And I appreciate you sharing your thoughts with me on that. I really do. So anyway, but this show gives a great opportunity to discuss the idea that, I think Bitcoin isn't for everybody, just like I don't think anarchy may be for everybody. But Bitcoin, certainly not. I don't want it really to get into the consumer commerce space, etc. And so I get to talk about that a little bit, and along with other things, and of course, it was just a great time working with Ryan Gilbert on this. So again, you can go to his website. I'm just going to let the music ride this out. But go to thebtclawyer.com, and you can find his other episodes. He's had a ton of great guests on there, Jeffrey Tucker and some others, and some names you might not have heard. So do check that out. Anyway, still got a regular episode coming out this week, of course, and honestly, there's going to be a lot of blockchain technology talk in that one. It's kind of unavoidable. that I'll have to bring it up, and because you know how much I'd much rather talk about. Well, first off, I'd like to talk about positive things, but second off, I'd much rather talk about some other tech stuff or even more science stuff. So more guests coming up, other specials all lined up, ready to go for you, and we still have Stephanie and I will be doing our post conferences wrap up. That will be coming out probably next week. So anyway, check out the btclawyer.com in the meantime. And of course, here is this episode where I appeared on the Bitcoin Lawyer podcast with Ryan Gilbert and just had a great time. Carpe Lucem, everybody. I'll see you on the other side.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Bitcoin Lawyer Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Gilbert, the Robert Goulet of Bitcoin Lawyers. Today with me, I'm happy to be joined by Brian Sovryn. Brian has a podcast of his own called Sovryn Tech, and he's also on Free Talk Live on Sunday nights. You can check him out at sovryntech.com. But Brian, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is great.
Brian, tell us just a little bit before we get started about your podcast and what you do there and what kind of topics you talk about.
Sure. Well, Sovryn Tech is something that was just born out of in the tech science and tech realm. I didn't feel that my opinions were being represented by any of the other podcasts out there. And so really it's, the tagline is it's all about science and technology and how it can set you free. And obviously that, blockchain technology and Bitcoin dovetail really easily into those subjects. And so that's what it's about. I talk about all those issues coming from generally a perspective of freedom. I will admit I'm an anarchist. That's kind of good to get out there. But, because, that just cuts through a whole lot of red tape when you say that. It's like, okay. And so that's what I talk about on Sovryn Tech. As far as with Free Talk Live, that's probably the largest libertarian voice maybe in the world. And it reaches out to over 165 radio stations in the U.S. alone. And then it's, of course, a very popular podcast. And on there, we just talk about anything and it all comes from that liberty perspective, that perspective of freedom. But interestingly, as far as Bitcoin goes, Gavin Andreessen and also Roger Ver, a couple of very large names in the Bitcoin space,
right,
very, very heavily credit Free Talk Live with getting Bitcoin to where it is today. I'm happy to be a part of that. Free Talk Live has been talking about Bitcoin since early 2011.
Yeah.
So pretty early on.
So if you started buying Bitcoin when they first started talking about it on Free Talk Live, you maybe could be independently wealthy right now.
Yeah, boy, no kidding.
Yeah, that's why I always buy anything they tell me to buy on Free Talk Live. You never know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. When I first heard about Bitcoin, I was working for a company that makes point of sale systems. And we had to burn what they call burning in the point of sale systems overnight. And to do that, I actually ended up running a bunch of thumb drives that had mining software, and I was mining some Bitcoin. This was pretty early on, to burn in the systems and test the RAM and whichever else, even though that wasn't really RAM intensive at the time. And that was a lot of fun to get to use another company's tech to do a little mining. But that was back before GPUs were doing the mining work or ASICs were even thought of.
Right.
But I don't have any of that anymore. So, nobody getting the ideas.
I don't think most people can afford the power bill to do Bitcoin mining now.
No way. Yeah, no, it's very impractical.
Did you hear the story about the guy who cops raided his house? They, SWAT raid, they bust down his door and come in there looking for the pot that he's growing in his house because his electricity consumption was way too high for normal use. So they said he must have grow lights in there. He must be growing pot. And they break in and find that he's mining a bunch of Bitcoin.
No, I did not hear about that.
Well, I don't have a source for you. I think I heard it on another podcast. I maybe heard it on Freedom Fiends. So I don't know if it's true or not, or if it's just, a rumor, but it makes sense to me, something that.
Yeah, I could believe it. I've done even a lot of altcoin mining has gotten pretty impractical as far as electricity bills go. And it does make you wonder about Bitcoin, about proof of work, I guess, which is, of course, the algorithm Bitcoin runs on, in general, if that's even sustainable for, the long term.
Yeah. So Bitcoin runs on a proof of work, but there are other altcoins like, Darkcoin. Does that run on proof of stake?
I think Darkcoin's proof of work. BLACKCOIN and NXT.
NXT is what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah, they're big names as far as proof of stake currencies.
So can you explain the differences to us between proof of work and proof of stake?
Sure. Proof of work it's pretty aptly named because what it does is it has a computer or an ASIC, whichever, use resources on the machine to do the work of figuring out mathematical problems. And this is just all this is designed as a security system to verify that the transactions happened and that the coins are out there. It just does this mathematical work. Now, proof of stake, the idea behind that is that having anything bothering to do those mathematical problems, do that work, is, they would say, a waste. It's like, you're just having it do math for math's sake. There's no, you could just secure things by merely testing it by the transactions that you do themselves, the transactions of sending coins back and forth, whatever happens on the blockchain. And so that's what proof of stake more or less is that it's essentially just confirming the system, the network, the blockchain via transactions instead of doing proof of work where you are just running these mathematical problems.
So it seems like proof of stake is the next step, I guess, in the technology. Proof of work being the first, and then it's kind of the next logical step. When proof of work comes along and has a lot of, I guess it's just kind of, it bogs the system down. Maybe it's slower. Proof of stake is a more streamlined system. Now I've heard.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think my own opinion on it is that proof of stake, or at least something other than proof of work, is definitely going to be more the future because, again, the proof of work system, I just don't see it as long-term sustainable.
So, I'm a lawyer. I'm not a coder. I'm not a computer guy. I don't know much about mining. So a lot of this is over my head, but I've heard Bitcoin described as Apple, like the company, Apple, the company.
Sure.
Where you've got something that's proven to be successful and popular. And there are a lot of competitors out there trying new things, and some are going to work and some are going to fail. And then Apple kind of looks around at all these other competitors and adopts a lot of the ideas and the types of programs that they're offering, the ones that have been proven to work. And so people are like, Apple's not innovating. They're not coming up with anything new. They're just stealing other ideas. I think that's great. I think it's fine because, by the time Apple, which is kind of a slow moving, but methodical and strategic company, by the time they adopt it, Apple users can trust that it's been vetted and it's something that is going to work well.
Yeah,
Bitcoin's
you either want to
kind
be
of the same way,
first or you want to be best. That's the idea. Yeah.
So Bitcoin's kind of the same way, but could the core code of Bitcoin be changed to adopt something like proof of stake if proof of work became too cumbersome?
Well, that's really it. It becomes the question of, can you just, and I think that's a good analogy that you made. I think that's the way most people think about it. And it's not unfair to say that Bitcoin is Apple and it will just kind of take the best points from each one. The code would be just completely different, as far as I understand it, if they implemented proof of stake. Now, what they do talk about doing is putting on what they call meta layers, like MasterCoin or Counterparty. There's a few of these things where it builds on top of the Bitcoin blockchain. But at that point, I don't think that's practical because at that point you run into the issue of scalability, which is right now, I don't know when the last time was that you downloaded the Bitcoin blockchain, but this thing's a beast.
Yeah.
It's like, it's well over 10 gigs. And if Bitcoin ever gets the adoption that some people desire for it, you're looking at, say, the blockchain ever gets to 1 terabyte in size. I mean, it's just a massive, most computers, that's the size of their entire hard drive. It's 1 terabyte.
Right.
And
it is conceivable that it gets there and not far into the future.
No, right. I agree. And so the thing is, though, is that now there's solutions to how to eliminate that problem of scalability with Bitcoin. And that is by kind of skimming or skipping or pruning away parts of the blockchain that just aren't necessary anymore. Now, while that can work for Bitcoin, the problem is when you add a meta layer on, like even, colored coins or MasterCoin or Counterparty or whatever, that those protocols, those separate protocols, even though they're built on top of Bitcoin, have to see every transaction ever done. Otherwise, they get totally confused. So you really can't build on top of Bitcoin and put in a lot of these extra features. There does seem to be, in my opinion, a hard limit to how far you could advance Bitcoin. But what it does, as far as being, money or whatever technical term you want to use, it does really, really well.
Yeah, well, and that gets us to another question where even probably just a year ago, we're looking at Bitcoin and we're seeing it kind of grow in popularity, but there's a lot of other competing coins.
Sure.
LITECOIN was a big one. I thought NAMECOIN was really interesting, and it's still around and it serves a purpose. And I thought, well, any of these that take the Bitcoin idea and fix what they see as some of the problems of Bitcoin, any of these may become the next Bitcoin. Like we had Lycos or Alta Vista as search engines.
Right.
But then Google came along and we don't even remember the names of those other ones anymore. So I was wondering, Bitcoin may not be the Google, but there may be a Google coming along. Well, now it's been some time and I haven't seen Bitcoin knocked off the throne. And I wonder if we're getting to a point where Bitcoin is solidifying itself as, what will become the Google of cryptocurrencies. Do you think that, or do you still think there's a chance that an altcoin is going to knock Bitcoin off at some point?
Well, I think a good analogy for that is MySpace and Facebook. Nobody in 2005, 2006 would think that MySpace could ever get unseated. Like it just by the numbers, it'd be impossible.
Right.
But then Facebook comes out of nowhere, and by and large, of course, it came out of Harvard, but it comes out of nowhere and it ends up, totally unseating just about every other social network to the point, honestly, that it makes. And this is important for Bitcoin too, because Facebook has gotten so large, its numbers make everything else seem so skewed because so many people think it's like, well, why bother with Google Plus? Why bother with Twitter when, Facebook is so huge? But that's it. By any other metric, by anyone else's metric, Twitter having, however many millions of users and Google Plus having 500 million users or whatever would be a rounding success. So you're basing the metrics are skewed to say that Bitcoin is the king just because these other ones aren't holding that value. Well, Bitcoin is just that much of a great success. That doesn't mean the other ones aren't a success, nor does it mean also that they could come along and unseat it one day. And I think that the point's going to come because, honestly, with Bitcoin, the consumer space, it really doesn't do – it does fine as money and as a store of value. Thinking of it like gold is a great idea, but I don't think it actually offers that great of an advantage over the credit card system overall in the average consumer's mind.
You mean Bitcoin?
Yeah, Bitcoin does not offer a greater advantage over the kind of the present system for most people.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about this on my last podcast with Andy Beal, but with the new addition of Apple Pay on the new iPhones. Isn't that what they're calling it? Apple Pay, I think?
Yes, it's Apple Pay.
It's got NFC in the phone, and you can use that as your credit card. I've heard people say, is this going to be a blow to Bitcoin because now people can just use their phone and they don't have to carry around their wallet? And that's one of the advantages that Bitcoin could offer. I think Bitcoin has advantages beyond that, but you're right, especially in the developed world, in the Western world, credit cards, at least at this point, people are going to see as more secure, more familiar for sure. And
yeah, well, just on like consumer protections. I mean, Bitcoin, at least I don't want Bitcoin to have consumer protections, honestly.
Because somebody ends up getting screwed when there's consumer protections.
Exactly.
And it's usually the merchant.
Yeah. But to the average consumer, they see a lack of protection for their buying power. And so I can't see why they'd want that over credit cards, why they'd want Bitcoin over credit cards.
Right. They feel safe with credit cards.
Absolutely.
If it gets stolen, if there are charges that they don't recognize on their card, they call up their company and dispute them, and the charges get reversed.
Yeah.
And so for the consumer, that's a great deal. But like I said, it isn't the bank that suffers. It isn't the processor. It isn't the consumer. And at the end, it's the merchant. So
absolutely.
If somebody steals your credit card and goes and buys a bunch of stuff and then you dispute them, the merchant doesn't get the money back and they don't get their stuff back.
Yeah.
So Bitcoin is good from that perspective. It's good for the merchant because the merchant doesn't get screwed because there's no chargebacks.
Right.
But I guess just going by the numbers, there's a lot more credit card users than there are merchants.
Yeah, and that's really an area where Apple Pay is, in my opinion, it's going to take off because Apple Pay is just, at the end of the day, all Apple Pay is securing the credit card system. And it's doing security more or less right by, it's not going to protect you from the NSA, but it would protect you from just about anything else. And you're still going to get those consumer protections and you're going to have that ease of use, And I know a lot of people want to say, hey, not everybody owns an iPhone. Well, give it time. All they got to do is come out with an iPhone 6C and then and sell it at the right price, and everybody can have an iPhone.
Right. And a lot of the Android phones already have NFC in them, I think, or some of them do anyway. I don't think it won't take long for something like Apple Pay to become very common in the non-Apple smartphones.
Right.
I mean, everyone's just using NFC and we don't have to carry around our wallets anymore, which
right.
I think it's a great advantage. But you said that Bitcoin, it's a good comparison to compare Bitcoin to gold because it doesn't offer a whole lot of advantages over the credit card system. So where do you see Bitcoin going from here?
Bitcoin from here, well, I mean, I guess there's a difference, right? There's where I want it to go and where it's going to go.
Well, let's talk about both, but let's talk about where you want it to go first.
Well, where I want it to go, honestly, I'm kind of a rarity here because I don't really want it to grow. I want it to stay sort of as the money transmitter for the part of the world, the people within, the Western system or whatever that really where the law is really hurting them. I like the fact that it helps merchants, and I mean merchants that are offering whatever services or products that you can imagine. I really want it to stay that way. And, I know that's unpopular because a lot of people really want it to grow. They want it to become almost like, the one world currency. But that's definitely not the direction that I think it belongs to, or that it should go. And I even wonder if that was ever its intention.
Huh. Okay. So where do you think it will go then?
As far as where it will go, it's definitely, as far as I understand it, Tim Draper said recently, which is a guy that I really respect, he had said that there's about at least 500 Bitcoin companies that are just in the wings. They're getting developed right now. And of course, that's also his theory. The fact is that people knew these companies are getting built. This infrastructure is getting built for Bitcoin. And so people bought into Bitcoin, but then the infrastructure wasn't there yet. And the reason that the price is so low right now is because they're waiting on that infrastructure to finally get released. And so when these 500 companies come out, and I believe Tim Draper when he says that they're out there, then it's going to become a very large part of the consumer, of the consumer network, of the shopping network or whatever, of online e-commerce. And when that happens, though, yeah, well, anyway, that's where I see it going, is that it will be a part of that, but it's going to be part of a big battle between Apple, Amazon, and then Bitcoin and whoever happens to latch onto Bitcoin companies like PayPal and whoever else.
Yeah. Now, if you're a merchant, especially an online merchant, it seems to me like it doesn't make sense not to accept Bitcoin. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't. Once you get it set up, once somebody explains it to you and helps you get it set up, why you wouldn't take it. It opens up your merchandise to a whole new base of consumers, including international consumers that don't necessarily have dollars and don't have a way to use a credit card online to pay for your stuff. So I don't see why an online merchant wouldn't accept it, even if they do it along with credit cards.
Yeah, the only reason I would see that they wouldn't want to do it is because it comes down to that consumer protections in that there's no chargebacks. And so I think that a consumer would be reticent to use, especially in light of things like what's happened with Butterfly Labs and others, where you give your money, you can't get that back. And I think consumers are going to be pretty cautious about that fact when they kind of get wise to it with Bitcoin. Now you can go through, third-party payment systems that are designed with, for Bitcoin that might allow for that feature. But until that's more common, I agree with you. I don't see why merchants wouldn't want to use it, but I can see why consumers would be pretty concerned.
Yeah. And that makes me wonder about the role reputation will play for merchants. And you told me that you're going to be at Coins in the Kingdom this weekend, speaking on Saturday.
Yes.
And your topic's called Dangers of Reputation and Trustless Systems. So is your talk going to be a little bit along the same lines of what we're talking about right now?
Definitely be a huge part of it. And also, of course, my opinion that Bitcoin really, in many ways, I feel should stay small and be used by the people that can really use it, that really need it, I should say. And it needs a lot of development as far as, how it could be used in, disparate parts of the world, be it Africa or even, Eastern Europe and things like that. I mean, it's important to keep in mind I think in 2012, I think the numbers were 35% of the world's population are online. That's it. Just 35%. I mean, and Bitcoin requires that persistent online connectivity to even work. So, but besides that, yeah, as far as reputation goes, and merchants are a big part of this, I'll definitely let your audience in on a little bit of this. And that is that we're finding out with services like Yelp and even Google. First off, you have this incredible battle between Yelp and Google over the, whose reputation system, as in like who gets the 5 stars or the 4 stars, whose even gets shown. Is it going to be Yelp's or is it going to be Google's results? Which results end up being the first that that a user of Google would see. Uh-huh. And obviously Google has a great incentive to have their own show up.
Yeah. And they hold the keys.
Yeah, exactly. And they hold the keys, which, makes a great case for decentralization. But anyway, the other thing is that there was a recent story on CNET in the past month where there was a restaurant in San Francisco that wanted to be the worst rated restaurant on Yelp.
I saw that.
Yeah.
They were giving discounts for bad reviews.
Right. Exactly. Now, why would a person want to do this? And of course, part of the argumentation is A, it would differentiate them, but B is that Yelp, these reputation systems that we've devised so far, that companies with millions and billions of dollars have devised so far, suck. They're not good at giving you an honest answer.
Well, and I think the problem with that, or the thing that restaurant was complaining about, was that Yelp was trying to shake them down, and I guess shake a lot of merchants down for advertising dollars. Like, hey, throw us some money and we'll make sure that you're, I don't know, the top of the list, or you're doing okay. And I think they were accusing Yelp of kind of staging bad reviews because they weren't paying them, or they weren't, paying for subscription or advertising or whatever they were asking for.
Yeah. And so this is the very nature of any algorithm or having any body that's in charge of any of these things, because this is what, a lot of these Bitcoin 2.0 technologies, like Ethereum, or even ones like BitNation and some others, that's their whole thing is like, look, you can build reputation systems right into our blockchain. But then when you look at the reputation systems that have been devised so far, they're terrible. And it's like, no, it's not even a good way to do business. Even on Amazon, the average person knows, because this is one of the, Amazon's kind of held up as like, this is how great reputation systems can be. And so you don't need government or the Better Business Bureau or whatever to take care of things. People can just do it organically. But I think everybody knows, anyone that's actually done business on Amazon, be it like an author or something along those lines, knows the honest people are the ones that usually give you 3 stars. You pay no attention to the 5 stars or the 1 stars, because usually it's either people that were bought and paid for to make you look good, or it's competitors that are trying to knock you down. And so all of that really needs to be explored a lot deeper before we go implementing it into the very nature, especially when some like Ethereum has just these really grand designs and dreams that they want to do. Before we turn over our commerce to these systems, I think we might want to perfect the code more or less a lot more before we do.
So it sounds to me like the problem with reputation systems like Google and like Yelp is that there's somebody at the end of the day who wants to get paid for that. Yelp wants to be paid for the service they're providing. Google wants to be paid, and that kind of skews the incentives, I think.
Sure.
If it was just pure, it would probably be better. Amazon rating may be a little more pure, because everybody's got to, if you're going to get bought and paid for reviews, you got to go find them yourself. But couldn't a blockchain reputation system, it seems to me like if you decentralize it and you take out the single centralized entity that wants to be paid for it, it might eliminate some of those Yelp and Google problems with reputation systems.
It may, but again, you do have overall, in my opinion, the only real guarantee you have as far as any kind of reputation is to just make it as like a small, a sample group, you would say, the smallest sample group as possible. And to want this one, I question the algorithms. And in fact, there's another great article out of IO9 this week, where they're talking about how algorithms themselves, can be very prejudiced just based on the algorithm alone.
Unintentionally?
Yeah, it wasn't designed to be that way, but it ends up being that way to the point where, people are getting forwarded again, and part of these reputation systems is also, giving you or like feeding you with good results and things of that nature, all of which has to do with, again, with reputation and, the idea that these are trustless. You're trusting the code to do all the work for you. I feel we're finding time and time again that any algorithm that we're running or any of the code that we're running, to rely upon it as somehow feeding the end user or the end consumer with good information. We're finding that that's not happening. And so now this would be fine if you have a competition of systems, like, if you have Ethereum wants to do it this way, or BitShares wants to do it this way, whatever, that'd be okay to have that. But oh boy, I lost my thought.
You're talking about different blockchain-based systems that may offer a reputation system, and they do it different ways. The algorithm is inherently biased. Isn't that kind of the point of open source software and technology, that people can look at it over time and suggest and make changes, and the ones that work rise to the top?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. God, lost my end game, but
happens to me all the time.
Yeah, sorry, man. Yeah, no, it's very true. But at the end, okay, I think this is what I was getting at, was that the idea that having it being this one big overarching, because none of them are actually looking for it. They're saying, okay, fine. You could fork Ethereum. It's all open source. You can run it and make your own and all this stuff. But they're really shooting for, and if you read their white papers for many of these Bitcoin 2.0 projects, if you read their white papers, they are coming right out and saying, no, we want this to be the TCP, we want this to be the internet. We want this to be the underlying thing that everything else gets built on top of. So they're not looking to have competitors. They're looking to be the one ring. And that's my concern, is that you won't have, none of these guys are even like recognizing the possibility that there should be competing systems for reputation. They're wanting to be the one. And now you take something like BitShares, where BitShares is actually trying to create multiple, what they call DACs, Distributed Autonomous Corporations.
Right.
And where they're wanting to do that, they're trying to create their own competition within itself to somehow kind of solve this issue. But at the end of the day, the grand schemes that these guys have, again, is, that they pretty much do everything for you. They are your identity. They are this, and they want to be the one. They don't want there to really be another option. Even though, like I said, some of them are trying to create competition within it, like BitShares, and that's not and Dan Larimer's a genius economist. He's a really a great guy.
Right.
He's the developer behind BitShares. But at the end of the day, I really worry, how far that this could go, because some of these things that they're trying to do, even like reputation, because reputation's a part of identity. Okay. And so they're wanting to, and at the scope that they're talking about wanting to do, they're wanting all business pretty much to be done through a Bitcoin 2.0 platform, all business. And when your identity is based on code, like we've talked about, previously, in this podcast here, that there's so many mistakes that can happen with Yelp, or that can happen with algorithms, with these systems, that it's just, I think it's dangerous to want to run headlong into that, into one of those systems, when really maybe the solution isn't code at all. Because at the end of the day, you're forcing people to act. You're trying to code people into acting correctly. Okay. And I don't think that's possible. I guess that's my end game.
Is it coding people to act correctly, or is it coding so that we know whether we can expect people to act correctly when we deal with them? You know what I mean?
Yeah, there is a subtle difference there, no doubt. That may be the case, but again, to rely upon that, to rely upon code to solve that issue, I think, when you have things like a bash bug, which is a scary, scary situation that happened, where they found out that for 25 years there's been this, now bash is the terminal that works on, so many various Unix systems, all just about anything the internet runs on, unless it's using a Windows server or something. You have this terminal, and it's like the core of being able to access anything on the computer. I'm trying to make this as little technical as possible.
Right.
And you have this bash bug, and you find out that that's been there for like 25 years. And it's, one security analyst said, this isn't a backdoor into the internet and into systems. This is a front door. into, into breaking security on things. And so when you have stuff that's been, being developed for a good 25 years, and then you still have these messes that can occur in the code, to want to put so much of human interaction onto code. Again, I think it's really dangerous. Whether the idea is maybe not to code people to act a certain way, even though I have seen people in Bitcoin talk forums and wherever where they're saying, look, can't we just code society to force them to act nice and all this? And, I read that and I get terrified, man.
Right.
So, but I agree. Your difference is subtle, and that's probably more accurate what people are actually designing it to be. But even at the end of the day, I'm worried about how far that could go.
All right. Well, before we wrap up, you came right out of the gate waving your black flag. I was taught in school that anarchists hate rules and they killed Franz Ferdinand and they love chaos. Yeah. So, I don't imagine that you're a bomb throwing kind of guy.
Not at all. In fact,
so just tell us real quick before we go what you mean when you say you're an anarchist. Sure,
absolutely. When I say anarchist, the pure form of the word is, without rulers. That's what it literally translates as.
Without rulers, not without rules.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's no gods, no masters, and it's not without rules. That's not what it's about at all. It's about the idea that perhaps hierarchies are not the most efficient thing, for human interaction, and that human interaction should be voluntary. That's what I mean by anarchist. Definitely not. I'm just about a pacifist, honestly, as far as violence goes. I don't dig it at all. I spent too much time in the military to learn that doesn't solve anything.
Well, that's great. I really appreciate your perspective because, like you said, you offer something a little bit different than most Bitcoin people. You're not looking for it to be ubiquitous, or you're not hoping that it becomes ubiquitous, but it's kind of niche, and you like the niche that it has, and you may want to keep it there.
Yeah, I love the technology. I just, I get worried what some people may have in store for it.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's been great talking to you. Of course, you can check out Brian's podcast, Sovryn Tech. And if you're going to be in Orlando this weekend, you can see Brian at Coins of the Kingdom. And I'll be there. And Brian, I'll make sure to say hello.
Yeah, absolutely, Ryan. It was great talking with you.
All right. And as always, check us out at The BTC Lawyer on Twitter, or go to our website, thebtclawyer.com. Take care. We'll see you next time.
You just experienced Sovryn Tech. Go to sovryntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.